Hey guys, hello gorgeous. Wearing my #1 t-shirt today in honor of the General Lee and my cowboy hat in honor of Waylon Jennings because I'm taking a look at one of my favorite TV shows from my childhood. It's The Dukes of Hazzard Season 1. Now my channel is mostly about all things 80s, and the first season technically didn't come out in the 80s, it was 1979, but I think it's close enough. Definitely the 80s spirit is alive and well and very strong in this, and I would even say that a lot of my other favorite TV shows from the 80s were influenced by the fun tone in the Dukes of Hazzard. So this is one of the original DVD box sets that I'll be looking at today. They were released a little later on in hard plastic cases, but this old style one comes with a paper box on the outside with some images on the back, and then I really prefer this original style that opens up with some pictures. You got them Duke boys, and then as you open it up even more, you get the discs, and you get an episode guide. These are double-sided, which I'm not a fan of. I've managed to keep these in pretty good condition over the years, but I just do prefer the DVDs that are single-sided because you get some graphics on them as well. It's that little extra bit of magic when you have a picture on the disc and you put it into your DVD player. But when you do take the discs off, you do get images of Luke, and there's one of the lovely Daisy, Catherine Bach, and then I would assume this one is a little tougher to get out. Good old Bo Duke. So to give you a little quick history on how Dukes of Hazzard came about, there was a movie that came out in 1975 called Moonrunners, and then a couple of years later there was this TV show which was loosely based on it. The names had been changed, but it was basically the same concept. This is also why there has been a little bit of confusion as to who owns the movie rights to the Dukes of Hazzard. When the Sean William Scott and Johnny Knoxville movie came out a couple of years ago, right before it hit theaters, some people spoke up and said, hey, we actually own the movie rights from all the way back to the Moonrunners thing. The Dukes of Hazzard TV show was just for television, it wasn't for movies, so they worked that all out. But that's why there is some issues with putting these out theatrically, because the rights have been split along the way. The basic premise of the show is that you've got two Duke boys, they're cousins, Bo and Luke Duke, and they are on probation because they got busted for moon running, which was illegal at the time down south. They live with their Uncle Jesse. No mention is ever made, at least in the first season, of their parents. And Bo and Luke Duke also live with their cousin Daisy Duke. So the whole thing is very tongue-in-cheek, you have to understand. It feels a lot like a cartoon come to life, with no mention being made of the parents. I was trying to work out how can Bo and Luke be cousins, and Daisy is their cousin, and none of them are brother or sister to each other, and none of them are the son or daughter of Uncle Jesse. They're just all cousins, uncle. It's better not to think about it, because the people who came up with this concept didn't put that much thought into it, and were probably laughing their heads off at the people trying to work this stuff out. This is just a fun, easy breezy show with not that much thought put into the backstory of it. More thought was given to the actual execution of each episode. So Bo and Luke Duke are on probation, which means they aren't allowed to use guns ever. The only weapon that they use are bow and arrow, which they say they use for hunting, but sometimes they use it to fight the bad guys on the show. The extent of their weaponry use on the show is strapping a stick of dynamite to an arrow, which is actually a heck of a lot worse than a gun. But it still doesn't give you that image, which is a violent image of one of the Duke boys pointing a gun at another person. So I think this was a wonderful way of painting the Duke boys into a corner where they can't be portrayed as overly violent. The dynamite they use for explosions, to create diversions or roadblocks, to mess up the bad guys, but it's never used to hurt any bad guys. These guys are old school heroes. Even though they're on probation, the law that busted them and that they're being on their best behavior to not disrupt, the law is painted as the adversary, the antagonist in this show. It says so in the theme song by the legendary Waylon Jennings. They're fighting the system like a two modern-day Robin Hood. That's basically the formula of the show. You've got these two guys who basically steal from the rich and give to the poor, and the richest guy on the show is the top bad guy, Boss Hogg, this just wretched human being. He's selfish, he's crooked, he's bought off the law in town. He's bought off the sheriff, Sheriff Rosco P. Coltrane, and his purpose is just to become richer and richer. So it is a lot like a Robin Hood story whenever the Duke boys mess up Boss Hogg's plans, and that's what they do. They're not really deviants. They're not troublemakers. They just often see Boss Hogg doing something wrong, and they stand up to him. They say, we can't do this. And what I really like about this show is that it's not just the Duke boys who are these white knights, these pillars of virtue. The symbol of virtue on this show is Uncle Jesse, one of my favorite characters, and I talk about old school heroes. I talked in depth about Optimus Prime being my ultimate hero a while ago on this channel. Uncle Jesse is another one of those. He is a do the right thing, boys. He is a salt of the earth guy. He might not be book smart, but he's spirit smart. He's soul smart. And Jesse is always the guiding light for the Duke boys and for Daisy Duke. The lessons that he instills in the Duke boys is very similar to those episode-ending lessons from He-Man or She-Ra or Brave Star. It's a fantastic show, despite the fact that in the first season, it is a situation where the Dukes are under probation and at risk of going to jail for the rest of their lives if they get caught. I still think, despite that, it is a great show for kids to grow up on. It's an important lesson also to learn that, you know, sometimes the people who are in positions of power aren't necessarily right. They aren't necessarily just, fair, selfless, have empathy. The Dukes of Hazzard doesn't push that button too much. It's not a conspiracy show. It's not revolt violently against the power. It doesn't beckon people to go out there and vigorously fight authority. If anything, its message is have fun with it. Let it roll off your back. Have some fun. Be a little wily. Be a little mischievous, but nothing too serious. So even though they get grouped a lot together, Bo and Luke Duke, they are pretty unique characters in their own right. They're not always interchangeable. Bo is the younger one, the fresh face, the one that yells "YEE HAW" whenever the general takes an insane jump, and Luke is the war veteran, which doesn't get brought up a lot in the first season. Watching this first season again, which I hadn't seen since I was a little kid, it was interesting to see certain elements brought up that are completely dropped in later seasons in order to make it more of a family-friendly or kid-friendly show. So watching this again, I totally forgot or maybe even missed it the first time around that Luke was a war veteran, Vietnam War, I'm assuming. And in one scene, Jesse kind of references his post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, he says something to the effect of, you know, just let Luke be. You know, he's got his thing from the war. So again, it's easy breezy, it's fun. They don't want to get too heavy. If they ever get heavy, it's about teaching a valuable moral lesson, and it's not about something dark and really difficult to deal with. But just knowing that Luke is the war veteran of the duo, then you realize that when the Dukes get into these serious scrapes, and Waylon is talking us into the commercial, then I get the feeling that Bo might be in trouble because he's the really young, youthful, naive, exuberant Duke who might not be able to get out of a jam. But Luke is the one who has been in some serious stuff. They don't go into it in detail, but he's there. He's in Hazzard County, and he knows how to take care of himself and his cousin as well. And you got Daisy Duke as well, and she's a great character because she's not just a damsel in distress. Sometimes she is, but sometimes she can take care of herself, and that goes for the Duke boys as well. Sometimes they're the Dukes in distress, and they have to be rescued by Cooter or Daisy or any of the other characters. And then there's who some people would say is the real star of the show. One of my favorite cars growing up. It's the General Lee #1. There was the A-Team van. There was Knight Rider Kit. There was the car from Hardcastle and McCormick, and there was the General Lee. And orange has been my favorite color for as long as I can remember, and I wonder if the General had something to do with it. Rewatching this first season, seeing the General in action, this car has so much power. Mentioned in other reviews, I'm not a car guy, but I can feel it sometimes in some shows when that engine revs and the driver is doing amazing things in it. I'm a huge fan of practical effects over CGI, and I loved Hardcastle and McCormick season 1 because that car had some power and the driver was doing incredible things with it, not just jumps but handling. And if you are a fan of Hardcastle and McCormick, not a lot of people will be going this way where they know of Hardcastle and McCormick and they don't know of Dukes, but I think they're very similar. Loving Hardcastle and McCormick, I absolutely loved watching the General too. Car chases throughout Hazzard County. The jumps are insane, and I never got tired of them. I thought, well, this is going to get formulaic after about the 20th jump over a creek. I'm going to get tired of this, but I never did. It's just one of those shows where I never got tired of the theme song, never got tired of the characters. Some of the episodes I was thinking, how are they going to keep this going? After a while, they can't just keep doing the Duke boys versus Rosco and Boss Hogg. They've got to change it up, and so they do an episode where they're an unlikely team. The Dukes have to get deputized and team up with Rosco because some other baddies come in from another town, so they have to take care of them. But it really doesn't get old. It doesn't feel like they are reaching, because the concept is just so fun and tongue-in-cheek. It doesn't feel like something that can get painted into a corner and, well, we're out of ideas. It's broad enough a concept, and the characters are endearing and charming enough that this thing could go for 7 seasons, 6 of them with Bo and Luke actually in them. And one of my favorite things about a lot of the episodes in season 1 are how cagey and crafty Bo and Luke Duke are. On the surface, they seem like they're just, you know, these country bumpkins, and they're not supposed to be all that bright, but they are so clever, and it's really interesting despite this just being the Dukes of Hazzard. And having grown up on the show, when I went back to watch it again, I was thinking, well, this is going to be pretty simple. This is going to be basically like a live-action episode of He-Man. But I found myself in a lot of episodes really drawn to the story, bobbing and weaving. It's like a roller coaster of the twists and turns that these Dukes of Hazzard episodes would take, because you'd have these bad guys come in and they've got a scheme going on, and it looks like the Dukes are in trouble. But it's not so, because the Dukes have a plan of their own and they've fooled the bad guys. But now it's a double turn, because the bad guys have already thought of that in advance and they've come up with a counter to that. But in the end, the Dukes had everything figured out and everything went according to their plan in the end. So they come off looking like real geniuses, despite just being moonshiners who are running from the cops all the time. So I really like how intelligent, how clever the Duke boys come off, as well as Uncle Jesse, even Cooter, who really doesn't seem to be all that intelligent a character. Same deal with him. He is much more clever. It just works so well when you have characters who appear to be one thing, who appear to be so simple, but they are actually very intelligent, very clever. They got those street smarts, or I guess you could say in this case, dirt road smarts. Gotta mention Rosco Pete Coltrane as well. Absolutely hilarious. You need an entertaining antagonist for a TV show if it's good guys versus bad guys, and I dare say Rosco is even more entertaining than any of the heroes on this show. Comedic genius, James Best. And what also really works about his character in the first season, at least, this is another aspect that they dropped in later seasons, never mentioned it again, but in order to just give him that one little tiny bit of justification in his own mind, because You know, this isn't Star Wars or anything, but in his own mind, Rosco P. Coltrane is justified because he worked his whole life for a pension and he got hosed over by the system. Now, anybody who works decades for a pension and it turns out not being what they were promised or what they thought for all those years, I think that you should see the writing on the wall. I mean, that's just what's happened to so many people with their pension. And in my opinion, it's just, well, yeah, of course. I mean, life's not fair. What are you going to do? But in Roscoe's case, he took it personally. He took it to heart. He wasn't at all happy with that. And so there are mentions of Rosco being a just sheriff. Everybody loved him. They thought he was a good man. But when the pension thing happened, it fell through. Everything changed, and he lived for the almighty dollar. And so he is married to Boss Hogg's sister, which that's a hilarious interplay between those two villains. Those scenes are really entertaining as well. Rosco and Boss Hogg, the way Boss is just so belligerent to Rosco, and Rosco sometimes sneaks in his little shots too. So again, I mentioned how clever the Duke boys are. Rosco's kind of clever too, despite all of the buffoonery that happens with him and his car chases and other stuff. He's got his clever moments too, and that's also entertaining to see Boss almost realize, did Rosco just get away with a zinger? Great thing about season 1 is that I think much more than subsequent seasons, a lot of stuff was shot on location. They went out to real places, drove on real dirt roads, went into real buildings like for the bar or other buildings, and you can feel it. It feels so much more like an old movie. Every episode feeling like an individual Dukes of Hazzard movie rather than a studio shot show that was shot quickly and churned out to be a weekly episodic syndicated type of show. So shooting in real locations coupled with the car chases, which are shot all on real roads, practical effects, no CGI, no green screening even, usually. I mean, for the most part, the fish tailing, the skidding, and then hitting those ramps and doing those insane jumps is all real, it's all practical, it's all really difficult. I think the difficulty that was endured in filming this first season of Dukes of Hazzard is what makes it so good. As they went on, they had to, I guess, do things a little easier, more studio work, more green screen work, and it shows in the later seasons. But as far as Dukes of Hazzard goes, if you haven't seen it in a long time, I think you might be really surprised at how good this, at least first season is. It's not a show that I could quickly blow through, though. I picked up Airwolf a while ago and just blew through season 1 because it was so awesome. Same with Incredible Hulk season 1, just ran right through it. I picked this set up in 2004 when it first came out. It's 2018 right now. So I've just watched a few episodes every year since I picked this thing up. So it's not exactly something that I could binge, but it was definitely something that every time I popped it in, every couple weeks or every couple months, I had a blast. It was so much fun. Just good old-fashioned 80s fun. And that's what I'm always talking about on my show, that spirit of the 80s, the positive, hopeful, optimistic vibe, the fun, the ability to just roll with the punches, to adapt, to just go with the flow and have fun with it too. I think the Dukes of Hazzard Season 1 really epitomizes that attitude. If you've got some Hazzard County memories you'd like to share as well, scroll down and go to town. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmas Day. Yee-haw!